Made in Texas, built for the world. How we compete with China.
How you're traditionally taught to run a company, it just does not work. Today we're talking about how to compete with China with or without tariffs. Most of the product that we produce here in Katy, Texas used to be made in China, Mexico, some in Japan, some in Eastern Europe. We produce parts without tariffs, we produce parts with tariffs. So here's a few of the methods that we use to keep us competitive and to keep the work here. A lot of times American products being more expensive is just by the way we set up the system. It's by how many hands touched it, it's inefficiencies in the system, and if we can get rid of that, we can compete head to head with China with or without a tariff.
I mean, yeah, that is true. And for instance, for car parts or car manufacturers, isn't there like 1,000 pieces of a car, or like that, or like more than that? And a lot of those pieces, obviously, are produced in China, but others, and then they're assembled in Mexico, and then they're finished in the U.S. or something like that. So there's multiple countries involved. But Tesla was the one who broke the mold, right? And that's why they're able to manufacture Teslas within the US because they make everything except for the batteries, right?
It's well known that in China and other countries, they have a much lower wages than in the United States. As a result, American companies need to be much leaner when it comes to labor. And unfortunately, the traditional structure of companies, the traditional structure of management, does not lean itself towards that. In a typical company structure, the workers doing the actual work, you try to pay them as little as physically possible. And because you're paying them so low, there's very low expectations. So you hire a few workers, then you have to hire supervisors. And then it turns out that supervisors need supervision. So you have to hire managers. So you have the workers, supervisors, managers, maybe a foreman. You have this whole layer of management, and that whole section is not actually producing.
Also, politically speaking, it's convenient to have a lot of employees for a company because the more employees that company has, the more leverage they have in the government. To be more specific, people want jobs. They want something to do to they want something to do in order to pay their bills. And if a company hires a lot of people, then the politician that represents those people is going to want that company to have as either tax breaks or some sort of benefit, benefit from something in order to keep those people employed.
Product. They're not actually generating revenue for the company. They're just there to manage and supervise. Instead of adopting a traditional company structure and paying the folks at the bottom the least that you possibly can, consider paying them the most you possibly can and having high expectations. When you do this, they're incentivized to work, they're incentivized to provide good quality, morale is good, and you can get rid of that entire middle section of management that just costs you money.
And you can do what Amazon's doing and put mass surveillance on their warehouses and pressure their employees to do their job. I'm joking, by the way.
It drastically lowers your labor overhead and allows you to compete. With that, you're going to get a ton of people that say you have to have a manager, you have to have a supervisor, and our company is a living example that you don't need to. When you walk our floor, there's no supervisor working around with a clipboard. We do have team leads, but they're working with the team. They're out there working and sweating along with the rest of the guys. And in a team, if everyone
Damn, that actually sounds like a fun environment.
everyone is compensated well, everyone wants to be here and they don't want any problems. They want to come in, do their work, and go home and take care of their families. So if there is someone dragging the team down, dragging the company down, it becomes very, very obvious very quickly. Another area where U.S. companies need to improve to be able to compete with China is their raw materials. I recently spoke to a door manufacturer, and they have a simple seal that actually comes from China. So originally, it's bought in bulk from China at 20 cents a seal, but then it comes from China in the shipping container, goes to a wholesaler, and then it goes to a regional distributor, and then it goes to a retailer, and then it goes to the contractor actually doing the work. So at the end of the day, they sell that seal, that 20-cent seal, they sell it to the customer for $10. That's because the wholesaler has to make money, the distributor has to make money, the retailer has to make money, and the contractor has to make money. So a huge way for manufacturers or American companies to reduce cost is go as direct to the source as you can.
And this is another thing. If the more close to the source manufacturer or whoever's gonna need the thing, the more direct to source you source your stuff from, the more dangerous it becomes. Because if for instance, if there was an economic downturn, warehouses, their job is to store stuff, so they don't really lose a lot. They just keep the stuff stored away, and that's, well, they just keep doing whatever they've been doing. But if a manufacturer has a oversupply of, I don't know, let's say iron, they're not a warehouse. Their purpose is not to store that iron. Their purpose is to use it and sell the finished product. So they end up losing money because based on what their business model is. Of course, you have large corporations or large manufacturers that have incorporated a lot of those things. Like they have a warehouse section and then they have the manufacturing section, and that way they can alleviate the financial pressures because they're doing everything. But just to be clear as to why a lot of smaller manufacturers don't go direct to the source, it's because it is more expensive to basically buy from warehouses, but it's also safer from economic turmoil.
So when you're talking about bringing parts from China, bringing it from Taiwan, or bringing it from overseas, there is huge logistical complications and cost to bring it over the water. You have to buy in certain quantities, there's long lead times, and American companies, we're already here. So if you can reduce your lead times, reduce the inventory that your customer has to order or has to hold on hand, that puts you at an advantage from the get-go. So maximize on that. When you're talking with suppliers, or even when you're talking with your customers, negotiate with them. You know, if it takes you buying another 5,000 pounds to drop the price per pound, it might be worth it. So have those conversations, or talk to your customers. You know, if you can have a consistent delivery where you can just kind of do a constant delivery, all those little changes help keep the cost down and help keep the work here.
The other thing is, he did say talk to your customers, but see the reason why services like Amazon have risen so much, or Alibaba for manufacturers that want to outsource materials, is because people just don't like to talk. Let's just be real. Even like, sure, they say, oh well, there's introverts, there's extroverts. I honestly think that most people just don't like to talk, because talking about business stuff or negotiations is, one, it can be annoying, and two, it puts a lot of pressure on whatever you're talking about. The focus, a lot of people are not business people, so that's why it's much easier to simply, have a one-stop shop. This is the price, this is how much I want to pay. There, done. But if there was more talking, I do think that business would work much better. Eh, There'd be more accountability between producer and um, what do you call it? Consumer.
Over the years, a huge strategy that we've done, we try to be as vertically integrated as possible. We have as many of our processes in-house as physically possible. So what that does, we bring it from raw material, we cut it, bend it, weld it, paint it, and deliver it. We even control the delivery. When you control as many of the processes as possible, you control the cost, and you control the delivery and the quality. If there's a quality issue in any of those steps, you can intervene very, very quickly and get it addressed so it doesn't affect your customer. This really cannot be understated, because if you have to buy it from another supplier, it ships to you, there's money lost in shipping, and then you repackage it, and then you ship it to the customer. All those are inefficiencies. Another point that we really need to talk about.
See, there's one thing, and yeah, he's gonna talk about automation, but there's another thing to take into consideration. The reason why a lot of companies haven't jumped into vertical integration is because, if I'm not mistaken, about 100 years ago, um, when the antitrust were happening, some companies were busted because of vertical integration. I mean, Standard Oil is one of those in which they controlled the entire system, and that was considered a monopoly. I'm not saying that companies that like this one, like smaller companies that have full vertical integration, I don't think they're monopolies, obviously, but it does make it more difficult for smaller manufacturers to compete, and that might have its own ramifications. Maybe not negative, maybe not entirely negative, but definitely to some extent negative.
Is automation and advancements in technology. So here in the US and at our facility especially, we try to stay on the cutting edge of technology. If you do not, you will get run over. We have parts today that we're cutting with the fiber laser. We're cutting them 10 times faster than we did 10 years ago. So you have to invest. When you're doing that though, you have to take a balanced approach. A lot of people, they want to automate everything. They want to get rid of the workers, they want to get rid of the welders, put it all on a robot. And that approach doesn't always work. There are certain jobs that are best suited for robotics. There are other jobs that you will invest millions and millions of dollars in robotics, and at the end of the day, a welder can do it better. When we can combine technology.
To be fair, that does apply to even the most bare bones jobs. Like for instance, um, up until this point, there there are robots that can do farming, but as far as I'm aware, there isn't a single robot that can successfully harvest strawberries. They normally crush them, and that's why a lot of strawberry farming is very heavily manual labor. But yeah, he's right. Even when it comes to welding, robots can't really at the moment at least they can't really test for quality assurance or checking that something got well done, if that makes sense, and it's not defective.
Technology, automation, and a skilled workforce, you get the best result. You get the delivery performance, you get the cost reductions, and you get the quality, the high level of quality. Competing with China doesn't mean slapping on a tariff.
Oh, another thing to consider is that technology is evolving very fast. So fully investing into technology right now might make your technology completely obsolete within 5 years. So, or even 2 years. So, unless a company is willing to invest in new technology every single 2 years or so, they're gonna end up falling behind. And for this, I'd say that he's completely right. That by having a skilled workforce, you can't really workforce doesn't really update as quickly as technology.
Or slashing your wages and laying off people. Take these methods, work smarter, change your systems, get creative, work with your people. Do this and you can compete on a local scale and on a global scale. If you have any questions, please let us know and let's make manufacturing great again.
Yep, that's that's what I'm saying. It's very interesting. I don't know what else I could think about. But yeah, manufacturing in the US seems very complicated, especially with cheaper alternatives. I know that a lot of companies have moved out of China but are going to India, which I hope India does improve the same way China has. That way there's less pressure from uh, Indian immigrants, and therefore they can, their economy can develop by itself without having to rely on immigration. But the US is falling behind, and I'm glad to see videos like this of small manufacturers actually figuring it out without having to rely on the big ones, the big guys, the big monopolies, who don't care about the people.